What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about Jalen Hurts. We're going to talk about whether or not you love Hurts, and if you don't love Hurts, you're probably not an OU fan. Probably not an Alabama fan for that matter. I want to touch a little bit on what's going on with LSU and Texas A&M, and that's getting to be really, really juicy. I also got a bit about the Thunder that I'm sure is going to make some people mad, but when you go 5-20 in Game 2 and you get skull dragged the way that OKC got skull dragged in Portland, you don't get to tell me ride or die, all right? That's just the way that is. And I also got Bronson Irwin who's going to join us later in the show, but hey, look, way I see it, I don't know what Lincoln's stalling for, man. I don't understand. You know, kids can go into the transfer portal at any time that they want to. And he's had several of them go into the transfer portal in the last 4 months. I mean, talking about defensive tackle situation, Derek Green's gone. Ron Tatum is gone. You could go either way with him. Tyrese Lott is gone. You know, and Jalen Robinson is gone. So if you're trying to protect Tanner Mordecai's feelings, that might have been a great way to go about saying you're not going to be the starter by taking this all the way up into preseason camp last year. But now with the redshirt rule and the NCAA transfer portal becoming a thing, it doesn't do anybody good to placate Tanner Mordecai. And for that matter, Tanner Schaefer, who I don't think is under any illusions about starting at Oklahoma. I just don't see it that way. Jalen Hurts showed everybody enough in the spring game to be named the starter. And you could say, hey, RJ, there are 14 other practices that we don't get to see that the coaches do their evaluations from. They'll watch more film. They'll see what Jalen does well. They'll see what Tanner does well. Yada, yada, yada. All right, way I see it, there are 3 guys at Oklahoma right now with national championship rings. 2 of them are on the staff. Both of those guys won them back in 2000. The only guy to win a national championship this decade at the University of Oklahoma is a quarterback. And the way that he commands attention and the way that he commands respect from that roster and from that coaching staff and frankly from the fan base, you cannot continue to go wrong with this charade. Lincoln got to pull this joke one time before, last year. But you're not going to be able to convince anybody who's been paying attention to OU football that you have a quarterback competition of any sort. It's over. It's done with. So him to continue with this charade, I don't know who he's trying to trick. Maybe himself. Maybe he's trying to make sure that he does his due diligence and that he's sewing up all the holes in what it is that Jalen Hurts does well and what Tanner Mordecai does well. What Jalen Hurts does poorly, what Tanner Mordecai does poorly. But with the kind of offensive line that was in front of him, and I'm going to talk to Bronson about this in a little bit, you got to believe you need Jalen Hurts there. If for no other reason, the Bills going to need some time to put together his offensive line. They ain't going to be very good in September. They ain't going to be very good on August 31st. You need them to be good by the Red River rivalry, and you need them to be great come November because championship November is still a thing at Oklahoma. Being undefeated in the month of November under Lincoln Riley is still very much more. I think you should take more pride in that than anything else. Even the Heisman trophies, even the college football playoffs, because championships are won in November. And if they don't pull it out the way that they did last November, they're not playing in the Big 12 title game, and they're not playing for a college football playoff. And the guy best fitted to do that for you at quarterback this year is Jalen Hurts. So love Hurts or don't. All right, let me do some checking in with some folks before we get to the phone. Kirk, what's good? I see you, fam. Sean Stapleton's in the house. Tyler Spencer, what's good? Let's see. Steven Gordon, what's good, fam? Lloyd Grissom, I see you. Tony! Hey, RG, I was cutting the grass. All right. Matt Bingham, what's good? Hank, what's good, man? Hyatt, I see you, fam. Bayou Boys in the house. Joey Smith is in here. I know my mom's in here. Shout out to Laurel, who helped me pick out some clothes. I hate clothes shopping. That's another deal altogether. Bronson, you there, dude?
I'm here.
Hey! Bronson Irwin. Coming in a little hot. Bronson Irwin, I've talked with him once before. I had so much fun. I asked him to come on after the spring game to talk a bit of not just OU football, but in particular the offensive line. Bronson, is there any reason to be alarmed by the offensive line play on Friday?
You know, I'm going to say no. I think we're at a point as fans of this great team that the expectations from last year have set a bar really high. So I think this is probably more typical as far as what you're used to seeing when it comes to offensive line come around the end of spring football. So I don't think it's time to panic. I don't think that it's time to start wondering how we're going to fix this issue and what JUCO guys we're going to bring in the summer to make that happen. I think the guys are here that are going to be able to make an impact this fall. And you've also got to keep in mind that during the spring game format, you've got guys playing on different sides of the football. You've got two teams. Sometimes that cohesive 5-man unit that would normally be working together is broken up, and you got guys that were playing tackle, playing guard, and vice versa, and just trying to make it work for the format of this game. So obviously, it's definitely not what we saw last year with the caliber of players that we had, but we're at a position where like we always do, we have to reload and find those next 5 guys.
Well, to that point, with the guys moving around playing different positions, like watching Bray Walker play guard just kind of sent me into a kind of a tizzy, and I understand that that's not necessarily that kid's makeup, and probably not where he's going to end up playing in the fall. But just judging on what you saw from the guys in the way that they played the positions and the way that their individual technique was, who stood out to you, if anybody did at all?
That's a good question. I think Bray is a guy that I myself was surprised was down there at the guard position. I think there's some guys that definitely physically look the part. I wouldn't say that anybody really made a strong case or differentiated themselves. And again, this is a scrimmage. You're playing against these guys you go against every day. There's quick whistles. They're not tackling people necessarily. Hopefully that's by design, this scrimmage. But it's a little bit of a different environment. You don't see all of the violence that you would typically see in a regular game, because again, it is a competition, it is a game. But that guy across from you, you got to have him come August to field the team and field the best team that you can going into that first game. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in necessarily this isn't so much less physical than we're used to seeing. I just think it's kind of the natural progression of the offensive line unit at this point in the year.
Okay, so over under on cuss words from Beadenbow during the game. I'm gonna set it at 23.
Oh, I'd double that and still take the over. And then you go to the film session. If you're doing an hour and a half of film, you probably put the over under it. Yeah, I don't know, 150, something like that. No, I mean he has high expectations, and I think that's exactly what you want. If there's anybody that can come in and get these guys prepared for college football and play the game the right way, it's him. So they're in a good spot, and I think that like I said before, I think a lot of this concern comes from potentially the fact that we maybe are a little bit spoiled based on what we're used to here again the last year, 2 years.
So knowing that we're a little bit spoiled based on what we're used to, I think that's been a storyline that's played out with quarterbacks. Everybody's like, Baker should never be as good as he was, and given what the circumstances for which he ended up at OU, even the circumstances for which he ended at Texas Tech, he was not highly regarded, so forth, so on. Kyler Murray was supposed to be damaged goods after his year at A&M, and then he ends up winning a Heisman Trophy. And with the offensive line, it feels like they're not supposed to be very good for the past couple of years, honestly. And you make a guy like Cody Ford a right tackle after he had never played the position as a starter or even really as a backup, and he's invited to the NFL draft this weekend, so Bill knows what he's doing there. But I take your point in that a lot of these guys are redshirt freshmen and freshmen. They're not necessarily upperclassmen. And I wondered about that, because you're bringing in a grad transfer in R.J. Proctor, who played left guard at Virginia and figures to play left or right guard at OU. But outside of that, your elder statesman is Creed Humphrey. And I'm looking at the offensive line, I'm looking at the depth chart, and I'm looking at what we saw out there. Where do you think the quote-unquote senior leadership is going to come from for this group?
I think that's kind of a unique situation in this scenario where there isn't a lot of guys that have a tremendous amount of experience. You mentioned the guy transferring for Virginia. I think he could definitely come in and help. But again, he's not used to this system. He's not going to be. I would guess to say that he's probably not going to be used to being coached by somebody like Bill. But you don't have to be a senior to lead, in my opinion. You don't have to be, a guy that's been there 4 or 5 years to be able to step up and tell people to do the right things and try to guide people down the right direction, so long as you're doing things the right way yourself. And I think that there's going to be some guys that fall into that category. Creed Humphrey, obviously, is a great player. He's got a year under his belt working with some guys. So much like our expectations are high, you think his expectations are going to be high going into this year. I played with a guy to my right and a guy to my left that both got drafted, and then the guys outside of them also got drafted. I have high expectations for you as well. So he's kind of like he's gonna have to kind of assume that coach on the field type of role. I know that's probably a played out cliche at this point, but being the center, the guy identifying the mic points, making the calls, he's going to have to assume that role both on the field and off the field. And, looking at the roster there, they've got Swinson, who's a redshirt junior, and that's about it. I noticed they have a kid on the roster, Bryce Roberts, and he actually went to my high school.
Transferred in this spring.
Transferred from New Mexico State. Right. This is a kid that I remember talking to when he was in high school, saying, look, you need to put on some weight and learn how to go backwards, learn how to pass that, learn how to be a guy on the offensive line. And he didn't want to hear that. He wanted to go. He wanted to go play tight end at New Mexico State, and here we are. It's kind of funny how things come full circle like that. But a very athletic guy, not going to be a 330-pound guy, but put a little weight on him, put a little strength on him. You never know. He might be able to come out there and swing around and maybe come in as an extra offensive lineman in a short yardage shed or something of that nature. But sometimes when you've got these kinds of situations, you can get creative and allow guys to help you with their skill set, and sometimes that means moving guys around. And I think there's some flexibility that could play to our advantage as well. There's not this is the right guard, this is the right tackle. You got guys that are used to playing multiple positions, backing up different guys, filling in where they need to. So they're going to have all summer and fall camp to obviously kind of solidify where they need to be, but guys have to move around. That's just the reality of the position.
And looking at the roster, and a great catch with Bryce Roberts, because Lincoln didn't have a whole lot to say except that he had come in and they were going to see what he could do from tight end to OL. But I wonder how inventive you're going to be, or have to be, knowing that this offense is going to be run-centric, in that 50-50 to me is run-centric, but it was going to be run-centric regardless. It's about how, because their 50-50 pass run last year, it's just, I still contend that if Rodney Anderson is healthy, Kyler Murray doesn't win the Heisman because he doesn't become much more the focal point of the offense. You don't draw it up to have a 4,000-yard passer and a 1,000-yard rusher. That's just not what you do. And with this offense, though, and particularly with Jalen Hurts' skill set, his ability to run, the ability to mix in some zone read, we saw some of that. But also, everybody knows how to run that guard tackle counter that we talked about a bit, and they ran it really well with T.J. Pledger in the backfield. And I've talked to Corey Hilliard, who's producer on my show, Fight Me for the Animal, who also played offensive line, played 8 years in the league, and he's a middle school coach now at Rogers doing the Lord's work. But he was saying, Bill said that he overcoached that guard tackle counter for Alabama. But it seems to be just a thing that all these kids come in here either knowing how to run, or they might just coach it to that degree. Because when they ran it in the spring game, it was the one play that I thought everybody on the offensive line knew exactly what they were doing, regardless of position.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly common play. I think if you have any type of athletes out front, you probably ran that in high school. I know I ran that play in high school pretty frequently. It's just kind of your standard your counter play, but yeah, I mean, when that's one of your bread and butter, your cornerstone type of run plays when it comes to Oklahoma is going to be that GT, which we really didn't run a whole lot of back when I was there, 10, 11, 12, 13. But the GT in the zone, and then obviously your one pull power is going to be kind of your basic stuff, and that's stuff that you've got to execute, whether there's a first round draft pick across from you, or a practice squad guy. I mean, that's just the reality. Is up front you can overcomplicate it and have your naming convention so complex, and check down, check play, and do your shift motions and all this stuff. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to run your core stuff. So if they're not running that effectively, if you're a guy that's been there for 3 years now, or even 2 years, I'd say probably you're not even at the baseline of where you should be just to be around, in my opinion. So I agree with you on that, and they've done a great job with that play over the last couple of years, really since Lincoln's been there, running that very effectively, which sometimes surprises me when you're going against some of those more athletic defensive ends that they play. Pulling two guys can be a little risky as far as those guys.
No, they'll spill it.
Yeah.
And that we saw that against Alabama. They'll spill it in a hurry if they're quick enough. And
right. Well, it puts your H back if you've got to put somebody on the backside to cut off that end that's tracking the tackle. It can put that person who's usually not going to be used to blocking a 260 or 270 pound freak on the backside. It puts him in a bit of a stretch position. But yeah, it's not a perfect play by any means, but when run well, it's kind of like poetry in motion.
No, and you're absolutely right. I think you picked up on something too, because when they ran it well, they ran it out of 4 wide. They never they didn't run it with the H back there, man. They didn't run it
right.
with the 2-back set, with that 2 running back 3 wide set. I just thought that was interesting too, because maybe as good as Jeremiah Hall looked running the ball, and even Braden Willis getting out there, maybe they're just not built to do that yet. And that leads into my next question. Watching the Bucks, which of the defensive linemen, defensive end or defensive tackle, did you think, other than Neville Gallimore, looked like they absolutely should be at Oklahoma and that they could make a dent next year?
Man, you put me on the spot with that one. I think Marquise Overton's the guy that's been there for a little while, and you kind of hope that he can stay healthy and make an impact. Again, you don't see kind of the full picture when you're doing this type of scrimmage environment, but I thought Gallimore did look okay. I thought there was a couple guys that was just really kind of inconsistent. One play a guy was pushing back the center, and again, this isn't your starting center. This is the guys that are in there making the scrimmage work. But one play they're pushing the center back 5 yards, and the next play they're getting drove back 5 yards the other way. I think if you're looking at this scrimmage as far as a person who's concerned about the defense, and rightfully so, based on last year's performance, I don't know that you come out of it feeling any better at all. Again, that's what the understanding that this is a scrimmage. Okay, this is a controlled environment where it's not played like a normal game would be played. A lot of it's scripted out, et cetera, et cetera. But I think still seeing a lot of the same issues that have kind of plagued us over the last couple of years as a team, as far as guys not wrapping up on tackles, guys catching wide open passes down the field, walking in the end zone, defensive line inconsistencies. I don't know that I saw anybody that was really consistently doing a great job and was where they needed to be, which is ultimately what defense is all about.
Hey man, I think you picked up on something that I actually want to get into. And for those of you watching live, drop a question. If I think it's good, I'm going to pitch it to Bronson. I'm checking the chat. I appreciate you being here. Alex Grinch agrees with you in that he doesn't think that any part of their defense is something to write home about. Matter of fact, I talked about this on the Young and Drum podcast, but I think it's interesting to bring it up again when he was asked, yo man, how much progress have you made in 15 practices? And Grinch says, I don't see a fast defense yet. I don't see a brand of football that would put us anywhere close. Certainly not an elite defense, but I wouldn't even make a claim to be in the top half in the country. And I'm going, throw your hammer, sir. Like, this dude does not give out compliments to his defense. And I wonder, what would it even look like for him to have a top half of football defense? And would we be able to tell him that, hey man, you guys are ranked, let's say, 41st in the country in total defense? Do you think this is the kind of guy, from his quotes, and I understand you don't know him personally, but from what you've heard, the big difference between him and Mike would be what?
Um, that's a good question. I think that remains to be seen. I hope that he comes in and preaches speed and swarm the football and wrap up and tackle and track your guys in coverage, which is not anything that I don't think any defensive coordinator should not be teaching. Full disclosure, but no, I think to get back to your point, if he's able to get them to the point, and I would be shocked if that happened this year, if they're in the 30s and as far as ranking a total defense,
Right.
they're going to win the national championship. Now that's 30s, we can be in the 30s. There's a lot that goes into that. We're in the Big 12. It's an offense-heavy conference. We don't have the strongest personnel. The personnel, these aren't, the argument's going to be, or the excuse will be that these aren't his guys, right? These aren't his guys. You didn't recruit them. They don't fit the system. Well, these guys are talented enough to be at OU. So there's a standard there that I think should at least be considered, that, you're here for a reason. If people didn't believe that you could play at this level, you probably wouldn't be here. And, I think at a certain point, you've got to just rise to the occasion. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to play good defense week in and week out, especially in the Big 12. I think we've seen that. And a lot of times you see these Big 12 offenses will go in the bowl game and they actually fare a little bit better on both sides of the ball, because they're playing a little bit different style. They slow the game down a little bit. They're not having to compete as many plays every game. But I hope that he's able to come in and preach that aggressive mentality, which obviously he has. That obviously seeps over into every area of his life. He's very intense,
Right.
Which is great to see. Which I think kind of reminds me a little bit about Brett Venables, back in the day.
Oh man.
Just intense handshakes, intense highs in the hallway, intense dinner. We're eating intense. Everything was just hyper focused, and he was locked in on everything he was doing. So, I hope that he can bring some of that. And I'm nothing negative against Mike. I played with Mike, and he's a great guy and really did a lot of things positive, I think, that people forget about from time to time. So I have nothing but respect for Mike, and really just hoping that this guy can step in and be impactful like he's done in other places.
No, and all the Mike negativity is on this side of the conversation. That's clear. But I think you hit on two things there. Venables has a story that Rufus had told me about Venables, Rufus Alexander, and that dude used to like drop Red Bull into his Gatorade and shake it up before practice, and then drain the Gatorade. And I'm going, yo. And then
That wouldn't be surprising.
Okay, all right. So
no, you got a coach out there that's just, the veins are popping out of his neck and his forehead, and that's not to say that he's not a player coach, so to speak. Obviously he does a great job of getting guys bought in and getting great recruits, and I've actually talked to him several times since I've been gone. He left after my second year, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, he's just a whole different level of intensity. That's it's not I'm mad, so I'm fired up. It's just constant with him. He's always fired up. He's always bringing that high energy, which I think can, some guys feed off that. Some guys don't, but I think if you're a defensive guy and your coach is out there and he's bleeding and he's sweating just like you are, it's gonna at least motivate you a little bit to play hard for him. But I'm hoping the new guy can bring some of that same intensity, and he also has some experience kind of being in that similar scenario as far as being on the other side of a team that's got a very powerful offense, and knowing how to manage that side of the game. The defense is out there sometimes a little bit more than you'd hope.
Score too fast guy.
Right.
No, I think you make a good point there. But I did want to point this out. Because we're talking about total defense and rankings, and you're saying if they're inside the top 30, they're winning a national championship. And a lot of that's predicated on the offense being as good as it was, not just the defense closing the gap. But in the Big 12, for giggles, we're talking about Iowa State being ranked 33, TCU being ranked 24th. And those are your two top defense, and I think Texas is inside like at 60 or whatnot. And this is last year. This is January 21st, 2019, NCAA total defense statistics. And depending on who you talk to, total defense is kind of a junk stat. And Bill Connolly's S&P Plus is a big deal, but it is attainable and achievable. Maybe not this year, but I've said for a long time, since TCU got into this conference, they proved you can play defense in this conference. Now, their problem is being able to score points. And when they had Trayvon Boykin and Sonny Cumbia out there, they didn't really have that issue. And we were talking about Baylor and TCU and whether or not they should have been in the college football playoff, and their schedules got the better of them. But I refuse to believe that you cannot play defense in this conference with the way that it's structured, if for no other reason than Matt Campbell came in there with John Heacock and said to people, we're going to play defense, we're going to keep everything in front of us, and we're going to force you to dump down passes, Will Grier, and they were able to get what they needed, right? In Texas, they play 5 and 6 DBs, but the difference is those 5 and 6 DBs are the kind of guys that Grinch wants to recruit. They're tall, they're rangy, they're fast, and they know how to tackle. As a matter of fact, to your point about the whole attitude of the team and swarming to the football, his quote that I love, that needs to be on a t-shirt, is, if you made a solo tackle, you're lucky. He does not want anybody making solo tackles. He wants somebody getting there first to tackle, or somebody getting there second to strip, or one or the other. I think we're gonna get upset about that, because we're gonna see a lot of lawnmower plays and a lot of Hakeem Butlering all over the place where he's just dragging dudes to the end zone. But it's a good thing to remember and to bring up that this is not a conference where it's impossible to play defense, and Alex Grinch seems to have a strategy in his head for how to combat these air raid concepts, and even that Ohio State, Texas basketball on grass system that they run down at Texas. So I'm interested to see how that works defensively, because I know that the guys have gotten a lot smaller, and I also wondered, would you rather play a guy at defensive tackle who weighs 295, 280, who can move, or would you rather play a guy at defensive tackle who's around 320, 315, and is just going to try to bull rush you, but also probably stronger than you? What do you think?
Oh, if I had to pick, I would rather play a taller, more athletic guy than a shorter, stockier guy. If you're me, for example, I'm 6'4", 6'5", playing against somebody that's 6'1", and is, like you said, very strong. And even if they may still only be 295 or 300. I think back to Lewis Nix from Notre Dame.
Oh, good pick. Yeah.
My senior year, he was listed at 6'1". He was probably 5'11". We're talking 350, 360.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
And those guys, you can't really move them. So it's kind of just like running into the wall, and you just try to stick to them. But they're a little bit easier typically to deal with when it comes to pass protection type situation. So it kind of depends on the game plan. But guys like him, guys like Kerry Hyder from Texas Tech,
right. Yep.
Who's still in the NFL, I believe. But that's all. That was just, and maybe that's personal preference. But for me, those short, squatty guys, and they're all athletic. I think that's kind of a usually if you're playing defensive tackle at a Division I level, you're going to be pretty athletic for the most part. But
so you're the kind of guy that thinks that I think you make a point here. That's what I'm saying. But everybody's an athlete at this level. Why do we say athletic?
Yeah, that, and that's kind of, it's like, whoa, that guy's really fast. It's like, well, he runs a 4.39. This guy runs a 4.22, like 4.22, and he runs a 4.41. Like, you're talking about a snap of a finger difference, and sometimes that does make a difference. But that guy that runs a 4.42 is really, he's the fastest 1% of people in the world, as opposed to the guy who runs the 4.32, who's the fastest, 0.05%. It's insane the margins we're talking about. But if you run a 4.2, if you're 275 and you run a 4.8, and guess what? You're really fast.
What if you're 4.8 and 303?
Yeah, Lane Johnson runs a 4.76 or whatever it was at 316.
Right.
That's more impressive to me than a 4.3.
Yes, absolutely.
It's insane, and people don't necessarily correlate that, but everybody for the most part is going to be athletic. Guys that played the position I played, mostly offensive guard, maybe on the lower end of that scale. But at the end of the day, we can move a little bit too, or we wouldn't be out there doing what we do. But they're all. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. You watch film all week, and you determine, when we're in this particular scenario, they have a tendency to do this, and you study your opponent and make sure that you know them, hopefully as well as they know themselves, and and try to compensate for some of those athletic deficiencies that might be there when you're talking about O-line versus defensive line.
I want to get you out of here with one question from the chat that I thought was actually pretty good. I thought I had it, but the chat keeps moving on you. That's what chats do. Travis Pinner had this. He said, "Hey Bronson, what is the biggest thing you have to adjust for an offensive lineman in college for when they get to the NFL, especially when OU runs an air raid and most NFL teams do not?"
That's a good question. He did spell my name wrong, but it's all good.
Hey man, I've had people spell my name Arjay. Okay.
Oh man. Bronson, S-I-N.
Bronson.
That'd be my stripper name or something.
Brosine? Brosine. There you go. Brosine.
So as far as the transition, I think based on my experience and the knowledge I have, I think the biggest difference is sheer volume of material. So we talk about all the time, OU just runs a couple of different run plays with the zone, the GT, the power, inside, outside stretch. I mean, you go to the NFL and they're running 30 different run plays out of 24 different sets. They've got checks. I remember when I was with the Seahawks, they would put these plays on the sheet and they're so small you can't even see them to get them to fit. And I mean, this was the total play call would take them like 10 seconds to call. Okay, so they'd call the first play, formation or personnel formation play. They do an alert, personnel formation play. So they could go up there, you're set for the first play, they check it or hit, alert in this scenario, or
Right.
kill, which is a common one. Now you got to process all that information. Now you're in the second play. Okay, so I just processed all the information for the first play. He checks the play. I've got to communicate with the line. This is on a 25-second play clock, right?
Right.
Checks the play. I've got to, half the time you're sitting there going, okay, what was the second play? The ball snapped, right? But you've got to be able to process that information quickly, and there's just so much more of it. And I think part of that is unnecessary. I think that there's a kind of the old guard in the NFL that doesn't believe that things can be simplified, and I think that's changing a little bit. You see some of these offenses that are doing things more similar to what a college offense would do nowadays. But I think it's just sheer volume. And, you're trying to learn something that it took you 3 or 4 years in college to really learn that system. And it's more complex, and you're trying to learn that in training camp, rookie mini camp, and then going into fall camp. And I'd say there's a little bit more pressure in that scenario than there is in college. I mean, it's certainly a stressful situation if you're a guy like me who's kind of on the fringe and, obviously wasn't a second round draft pick. Your job's on the line every day, and then one day you don't have one anymore. So I'd say just kind of the total package as far as, coming from our offense, playing with Bill Beatonbow, you're coming in physically ready. Put your hand on the ground. Let's go.
Right.
Some of the blocking schemes will be a little bit different because they typically tend to use a little bit more help from the tight ends and H-backs and fullbacks and some of that stuff that they don't see as much at OU. So I think it's really just learning some of that, the stuff that's not as familiar, and then just being able to handle that sheer volume of content that they put on you. And it's not, we'll kind of learn as we go. It's you got to learn it all now for practice tomorrow, basically. So it's just it's just different in that respect. And obviously, if you switch teams, that whole thing can change overnight, which is not easy. Can say that from experience as well. You're trying to learn the whole playbook in 48 hours before a preseason game. It's tough to do, but I'd say that's the biggest thing. Physically, not that much different. I think much like you see at the college level, you see offensive linemen, defensive linemen that you kind of wonder how they've been there for 4 or 5 years. How is this person not get beaten out or cut or whatever? But it's just the way the game works. And then there's also the other components as far as salary cap and compensation, there's that nature that change a little bit, obviously, but it's just a little bit different. At the end of the day, it's football, and you find a way to go out there and compete. It's just a matter of can you handle that step up in both knowledge and then competition. Obviously, is there's nothing quite like that.
All right, man. That is Bronson Irwin. I put up a best of our interview that was over an hour long. It's really good. You should listen to. But there's a best of up immediately in front of this video. It's best of Bronson Irwin. One of the cool stories that he told was the subterfuge during the 2013 season that led to beating Alabama for a Sugar Bowl title. Played at Oklahoma as an offensive lineman from 2010, 2013. I'm going to leave you with, green, right, strong, slot, spider, 2Y, banana. And memorize that. Don't know what the hell it means. It's got flood right. It's kind of thing I think, they might try to make you memorize, and then there's a kill out for that. Bronson, thanks, bro. I sincerely, I appreciate it. I like doing it. It's fun. We should do it again.
No, I'm definitely on board for doing it again. We've got to get some intro music. I think we're gonna do like baseball
Copyright?
walk up style.
Copyright?
Oh, I don't. Yeah, you're on YouTube. That might get tricky.
Copyright. Yeah, we don't like to play with copyright on YouTube. But hey, if I dumpster dive and I find you some stuff, right? I'll let you pick through it and we'll do something. Cool?
Right on, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
Bronson Irwin, awesome dude. I need to hook him up with that Baby Shark intro music. I'm playing Bronson, sorta. So one of the things that I did want to talk about before we get out of here was LSU's athletic director stepped down. Less than 24 hours before that was even announced, they had their athletic director already positioned who's going to succeed him. It is Scott Woodward out at Texas A&M. Scott Woodward, wow, I mean that's an intense hire. That's an intense hire for college football. That's huge because you'll remember the legendary overtime game between LSU and Texas A&M. But Scott Woodward just brought Buzz Williams in from Vatech. He hired Jimbo Fisher away from Florida State with the substantial $75 million 10-year contract. But before that, he was the AD at Washington, where he hired Chris Peterson. So this dude knows from hiring football coaches in particular, but basketball coaches as well. And I wonder what that means for Will Wade at LSU, who was just reinstated. Was he just reinstated to be fired by Scott Woodward? I would think so. Now, people in College Station are going to get upset about this, and you're going to hear from your family, your friends, whoever went to A&M. I hope you dunk on those people and tell them, Woodward's from Baton Rouge. What did you expect? He has an apartment in the French Quarter. He has campground, I want to say in like the Isle. And then his entire family lives in Baton Rouge. What did you expect? As soon as LSU offered him the job, he was gone. It's like, look, it's like Uncle Elroy in Next Friday. See, what it was Uncle Elroy is walking and talking with Craig. And, he's in his satin pajamas. I can't rock no satin pajamas. And his empty pool. And he was saying, I know what you're thinking. I told you I would never leave the projects. I'm down with the hood. I'm from the projects. But as soon as he got his check, he was gone. And that's what Scott Woodward did. Scott Woodward got his check and he was gone. You know what time it was? I mean, even in Texas Hill Country where they have all the money. The most money in college football, A&M. Like $214 million in revenue for the athletic department last year. Texas was second with $212 million. They do the most with the least. Or they do the least with the most. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But you're going to hear from your ampersand you fam, your ampersand you friends, and you just tell them straight up. He went home. We all go home. That's why they call it home. So you can go there. So if you're not from home and you living away from home and somebody offers you a better gig back home, you going to make like Happy Gilmore in that golf ball and you going to go straight home. Okay? All right. Really fun show. I'm glad Bronson came through. If you like the channel, please subscribe, rate, review, all those sorts of things. There is no rating and reviewing. That's a joke. But yes, do subscribe, like the video, whatnot. There is a podcast up between Brandon Drum and I on the Young and Drum feed. Yes, it took us a while, but it's an hour's worth, and it's really good. I'm going to put it up at some point, but I am one man producing this show, several others. I'm having a good time, though. This is a lot of fun. Thank y'all for supporting the channel. The folks on Patreon, the folks who hit up the Super Chat, who make all this stuff possible and make it happen, clap for them. You know what I mean? It's really fun. It's a blessing to be here. It's a blessing to be able to do this show. I really love it. I'm having a great time. All right. That is it for me. If you like the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. I will see you tomorrow. Deuces.